Hello, and welcome to a DoneJS LA Hack Night live stream. My name is Chasen Lahara, and I am joined in person today by some folks in Santa Monica. Say hello. Today, I just messed up the HDMI. That's awesome. So today we're going to go through the one of the CanJS guides. My monitor is still, there we go. We're going to go through one of the CanJS guides to build a video player that has custom controls. Let me go ahead and share my screen to show what I'm talking about. All right, so in HTML5, the video element was added years ago, right? And it's pretty basic. You create a, let me hide this. You have a video element and you can provide whatever source materials that you want. So you can have a whole list of different formats and that sort of thing. And the browser will pick out whatever file formats that it can play. And you can add a controls attribute to the video element, and the browser will decide however they want to render the controls. So like in Chrome, we've got the PlayPause, the current time and duration, a little slider for being able to go to different parts of the video, some audio controls, and a way to download the video, which is cool. If you're ever on a project that is working with video, inevitably, you're going to want to customize how those controls work, where they are on the page, what they look like, what controls you expose or don't have. You're going to want to customize that, and there's no easy way for customizing the all of those different aspects of a video player. So that's what we're going to do today. So we're gonna get rid of the native controls that the browser has, and we're going to build our own. Ours are going to be pretty simple. We're going to have a play pause button that will start and stop the video. We'll have the little slider for being able to scrub through the video, and then we'll have the current time and the duration as well. And we'll do that all with still using a video element for actually playing the video. And then our custom controls are all going to be done with CanJS. And at this point, I can hear everyone in the room asking, what is CanJS? It's a front-end JavaScript framework. So you can think of it as like a Vue or React or Angular. There's a million of them out there. CanJS has been around for a while, like a decade. Has its history in JavaScript and BC, got renamed to CanJS, I don't even know how many years ago. And its conceptual model is fairly straightforward. It's mostly built with observables that you can change the values of, and those changes are reflected in the rest of the UI, and you don't really have to do anything to have different parts of the UI update. And everything's built on components. So nowadays, it's well known that the secret to building large applications is like not to do that. That's a terrible idea to try and build like one huge, large application. If you've been developing for a while, actually, I want to ask how many people are like new to development in the past like 6 months or so? Cool. Who's been developing for at least a year? At least a year, at least 2 years. We'll keep the hands up until at least 3 years, 4 years. Okay, cool. So some of you definitely have built massive UIs with jQuery, and it's just it's a mess. So secret to building those large applications is to build small mini applications, components, custom elements that do one thing and focus on one thing well, and then you can build larger UIs by composing the smaller components or the smaller custom elements into something larger. So CanJS is based on this component model. We'll be using something called CanComponent, and it has three main properties. When you create a new component, there's three main parts to it. The first is the tag. Let me bump this up. The first is the tag, the name of the element. So in this example, we have the myCounter component. The second is the view. It's the HTML that you want rendered for the component. And right now with CanJS, we have a templating language called CanStash. Who's used handlebars or mustache or something like that before? No. Okay, cool. It's fairly straightforward. It's in a stash template, there's double curly braces for basically where you want values inserted into the template. And then there's some special things that CanJS adds on top of that. So we've got the curly braces, and then for something interactive, like when a button is clicked, we have these event listeners. So we can say on whatever native DOM event we want to, and when that event happens, then, or when that element emits that event, then we can run whatever code that we want to. So that's the second part. The third part that ties this all together is the view model. So this is, you can think the model that's backing the view. So in ours, we have a count property that's default value is 0. And we have this increment method that when the button is clicked, then we want to increment the view model's count property. You'll notice that there's no glue code for like when the count changes, I want to update the view or anything like that. That's kind of abstracted away for you with CanJS. So that the end result is like with, I'll go ahead and inspect this. So in the page, we can have a my counter. Let me make that larger. We can have a my counter custom element anywhere in the page, and then it'll be responsible for, and CanJS will be responsible for rendering that view. And then we can do things like click the button and the view will be updated. And in particular, just the part that needs updating will be updated. So the whole view isn't going to be re-rendered every time. In our case, in our template, when we increment the button and just the count is changing, that means that just the text for the span is going to change, and you can see that it's highlighted. Just the span's text is being set. That's it. That's the main. Those are the main principles for building CanJS applications. Is building using components, having a view that with the like stash templating language, and then the view model that backs it, that has all your data and all your methods defined that the view needs. Any questions or comments before we move on? Cool. So what we're going to do today is we're going to build this video player. So we talked about how we'll have the play pause button, we'll have the little slider, and we'll have the current time iteration, and all of this is going to be a CanJS component. So I'm going to ask everyone with a laptop to go ahead and go to CanJS.com. I'll do it fresh again, just so people can see. When you go to CanJS.com, on the left-hand side, there's a guides link, and then under the recipes section, there's a video player guide, and we're going to be using this for reference throughout the night. You can see the guide is broken up into a bunch of different sections. And what we're going to do in the room tonight, and I guess on the stream too, is we'll talk about like what's the next smallest step that we can take to building our video player, and then talk about what we need to know in order to accomplish that. And then I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to try it on your own, try hacking on it on your own, and try and come up with something. And then as a group, we'll go through it together and come up with a solution. And then for each section, we'll be able to catch everyone up. So if your code didn't look like the code that we write together, that's okay. You'll be able to copy paste it really easily. So let's get started. If we scroll down to the setup section, there's a JS bin that's embedded in the page. If you're feeling adventurous and you want to do this like locally, you are more than welcome to. We're going to use JS bin because it's just dead simple to do it in the browser. So click on the JS bin icon in the upper left of the embed, and then go to File and Clone. We want to create our own copy. Otherwise, JS bin is going to tell us you're modifying someone else's, and you can't do that. So go to File, and then click on Clone, and then you'll have your own copy of the code. So let's look at what we're starting off with. It's only a few lines of code. We've got a script tag that's including CanJS and an application. If you were building an app with like Webpack or Browserify or Steel or something like that, you could install it from npm. For us, we're just gonna include a script tag, and then we've got all of CanJS available to us. And then right now, we just have a plain video element with the controls attribute with the source. We're not using anything for CanJS right now. We've just got our starting basis for where we want to start from. And then some CSS so that if we didn't have that, the video would be off the screen. Control it a little bit. We're not going to do anything with the CSS today. And then we're going to write a bunch of JavaScript. So once we have that to start off with, the very first thing that we'll want to do is create a new component with CanJS. So we want to have something like, actually I'll reference what's in the guide. So we want to have, there we go. So we want to have something like our own video player element. And we're going to pass it the name of the video that we want to load. If you're feeling adventurous, you can find other videos online and load those. But we'll do a old Tom and Jerry skit. So we're gonna pass this video URL to our own component. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but essentially what this is saying is the video player is going to have a source property on it that will render in the view and we'll have in the view model. And we want to pass this value as just a raw string as the source property. We'll get into, this is what's called a binding. There's also like one-way and two-way bindings. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But for now, we just need to be able to pass the video into our component. And then we want to create a component that does the same thing as, this right now. So it should be a video. We'll keep the controls for now. And then instead of hard coding the URL, we're going to want to take what is passed into us and render that instead. So what do you need to know? Well, we kind of went through this already with what was on the homepage, but we'll do a quick review. In our JS bin, we'll be able to access can.component, and then this .extends, we give it an object. And essentially what we're doing is we're telling CanJS, anytime you see an element with this tag, with the video player tag, go ahead and take over that element and render inside of it. And then we'll be able to use our video player element anywhere in HTML, and CanJS will render that component. The second thing that we need to do, that we want to do, is actually have our own custom view, right? We want to have this video player element in the page, and then we want to render our own video elements with the source that we need. So with CanJS, you can provide the view property, and you can have whatever string, and it'll use that as the view. And then the third part is to define stuff in our view model. So in our view model, we're going to be taking source attributes, and then that will be used in the view. So kind of refresher on stash. When we have a view model property defined, that means we can use the double handlebars in the view template and have that value rendered. So even as that value changes, it'll render that in the template. And I think that's about it. I think those are the main things that we need to know. So I'm gonna give everyone a few minutes to try this out on their own. You definitely can cheat and already look at the solution. I'm gonna encourage you guys, give it a hack with what you know up before the solution. Try it out, and then we'll go through the solution together in just a few minutes. Sound good? Cool. Hey, welcome. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I'm glad you made it though. There's pizza and drinks if you're interested. You have a laptop. Let me show you. That's the Wi-Fi information. We're just getting started right now, so you haven't missed much. Yeah, sorry. Cool. Then you can go to CanJS.com. And if your text size isn't crazy big like mine just was, on the left-hand side, you'll see a guides link. So click that, and then under recipes, you'll see video player. And we'll be using that as a reference. On this page, if you you see the little like in-page table of contents, go to setup, and then there's a JS bin that's embedded. You can click the JS bin icon, and that'll open the JS bin in another window or tab. Then go to File and Clone to create your own copy that you can mess with. And what we just went through was kind of talking about the first thing that we want to do is render a video player component in our page, pass it the video that we want to play, and then in the JavaScript tag in our or tab in our JS bin, we want to use CanJS to create a component that renders a video element with that source. So you can kind of skim through in this section, like the problem and the what you need to know. You can kind of skim through that to catch up.
That draw that you add is to create a binding?
Yeah, so there's 4 different bindings or types that this could be. There's raw, which just says, like, take a string, use this value as a string. There's from and to, which are one-way bindings. Either like if this was sourced from a value, then we would parse this value as whatever is in the scope of the template and set the source property of the video player element. And then the reverse to is, if we want to take the source from the video player and bind it to another like variable in the template. Those are the like 2 directions of a one-way binding. And then there's two-way binding, which is if this was like source : bind. So when one updates, update the other, and vice versa. And we'll use the other bindings a little bit later and talk about them more. We'll take a couple more minutes before we hack a solution together. All right, how are people feeling? Anyone feel like they hacked something together? That's okay. We'll do it together. So we'll look at the official solution in just a moment, but let's try and think this through. So so the prompt was we want to have a video player custom element, and we want to pass in the URL to the video that we want to render. So we're gonna say video player, and then we're gonna do the source raw and pass in the URL. And then I'm gonna close this tag. And then in our JavaScript, we wanna create a new CanJS component. So we're gonna do can component extend. And we need three things. We need a tag, which is gonna be video player in our case. So whenever CanJS sees the video player element in HTML, it'll take over and render that. We need a view, which in our case, to start off, we want our view to, oh, that's poorly formatted. We want a video element. We're gonna keep the controls for now. We'll eventually delete that. And then we want to, for the source, we want to render what's passed in to the component. So we can do double curly braces and then source. And this actually works as is. So if we see on the right in the output, it'll play the video, and this works. So stuff that's passed into your element, you don't have to define in the ViewModel, but we're gonna go ahead and do that for completeness. So our third thing is we're gonna make a ViewModel. It's gonna have a source property, and we're gonna say that it's a string. So we can say kind of a shorthand. We can say our source property is gonna be a type of string. If we wanted to be fancy and do it long-handed, we could say that this is expected to be a string. So that's what we needed to start off. Let's see, does that match the official? Yeah, that matches what's on the page. So to catch up in your JS bin to where we are right now, there's a copy button in the upper right of all of the code examples. So I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to click copy, and I'm going to replace everything in my JavaScript tag, and then I'm going to scroll down and do the same thing for the HTML. I can click copy, and then I can select all and replace what's in my HTML tab and JS bin with the official answer. And now we're all on the same track. Yeah. Yeah, so this is the final version. If you scroll down a little bit more, it's the JS bin that is like the start. So you can click on the JS bin, like this one, the file one. Sweet. Okay, so that's the like kind of bare bones starter one, and now you can go to those. We'll go to the two code examples and copy these. Where are the? So yeah, farther down. So yeah, so this is the solution for the first section. This is the copy. Yep, exactly. So yeah, and then you can go to the JavaScript tag and then tag, yeah, paste that, and then do the same thing with the HTML. Go back to the, and then copy the HTML. Yeah, you can do that, or it also has a copy button, so you can just select all, delete, place it. Yeah, cool. Anyone have any questions or things they want to talk about before we move on? No? Cool. All right, so next thing that we're going to want to do is we want a play pause button, and for right now, we just want a play pause button that when you click play on the native controls, then we want to show the word pause, right? And then if we stop the video playing, then we want our button to say play. We want to do this, so we're gonna basically we're gonna add a div to our view with the button. We're gonna keep all of our our custom controls in a div together, and then we want this play button to, or we want this button to do one of two things. It either shows play or shows pause, depending on the current state of the video. So what do we need to know? Well, in Stash, in CanStash, you have these expressions that you can use to change how the view is being rendered. So for example, you can do double curlies and then an octothorpe or hash, and then do an if to say, okay, if this variable or if this property is a certain value, then do one thing, and then double curlies to do else, and then a closing if statement. So what we can do is we can say, okay, if in our view model the playing property is true, then we want to show the pause, and then if the playing property is false, then we want to show the play button. We can do that by defining a playing property in our view model. In this case, it's going to be a Boolean. It's either going to be true or false if it's playing or not. We're going to need some way to flip that between true and false. So we can add a play method that sets this dot playing to true, and a pause method that sets this dot playing to false. And those go in our view model. And then the last thing is we need to find out when the video is paused or played. So luckily, the video element emits a bunch of different events. If we go to, this links to the MDN docs, where it has a bunch of properties, methods, what it inherits from, and then events. You can see it's just like dozens and dozens of different events for stuff like play, playing, can play, stalled, all of these different things have different events. So in CanStash, we can listen to when an element fires an event with the on syntax. So we can do on click for when a button is clicked, or on any of these events to find out when the element fires those. And then we can call a method. We can call our own method whenever those events fire. I think that's all we need to know for this point. So we want to add the div in the button. The button is either going to show play or pause, depending on whether the video is playing or pausing. And then we want to listen on the video element for whatever events might be helpful, and then call our own player pause or whatever methods to set that view model property. Anyone have any questions before we start hacking? No? Okay. Take a few minutes, try and come up with a solution on your own. And again, we'll hack together and come up with a solution after everyone can experiment. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to help. How's everyone feeling? Anyone feel like they're starting to come to a solution? Ish? You guys want a little bit more time? Do you want to dive into it? Yeah. A little bit more time? Okay, cool.
I know we have the methods on the ViewModel.
Like within the template, or so. So like this example is showing accessing a property
On the ViewModel.
on the ViewModel. Yeah. So whatever the ViewModel displaying property is set to.
There's a method.
So if there's a method, you could also call that. So if you, let's say the play method returned a value that you wanted in your template, you could also do like play and then.
There's no this dot play.
So actually that does work. There is a this defined, and you could.
But this abstracts that.
But you don't need to. Yeah, if you wanted to, this could be this dot playing instead of playing. But it's kind of assumed in CanJS, it's whatever the current context is will be the this.
But if I want to click, then trigger something. Where do I set up the?
Yeah. So was that? Oh, that wasn't in a section. What we're going. Oh, this is in this section. So like for setting up this div, when this div is clicked, you can do on:click and then provide it whatever method you want called. So like in this example, if the div is clicked, then it'll call the do something method in your ViewModel.
Oh, you will understand that I want the method from the.
Yep. Not in an event listener like this, no. Because we're not printing the value of the method, we're just referencing the method itself, if that kind of conceptually makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah.
The curly braces are for when we want to like render a value in the templates, or the curly braces also mean, like here, the curly braces mean, all right, we're going to do some sort of expression. Cool. Let's
So what's the role of this? I know it's probably in the syntax, but why do you have like a hashtag or pound sign in front of it?
Yeah. So normally, if it was just like double curly and then no hash mark and just if, then it would try to access a property or a method in your ViewModel. And so in this case, anything that is double curlies and then the hash means that's kind of reserved for things in the templating language. Like there's if, there's switch, there's kind of basic logic controls. So that's why that's there.
So you're saying this is not supposed to be rendered, it's supposed to be processed. That's code, right?
More or less, yeah. Yeah, basically anything in the double curlies is going to be processed somehow. And usually if it's just let me get to an example. If it's just the double curlies and a value, then it's taking whatever that value is from the ViewModel and rendering it. or if it's the double curlies and the hash, then okay, there's some sort of like control statement that we want to use. So let's start going through a solution together. So our goal for this was we want a button that shows player pause, and then when the video is playing, then we want it to show pause, and when it's paused, then show playing. I think I already, yeah. So I'd already copied the div and the button. So in here, what I want is actually gonna break this up a little bit. So in here, what I want is if do double curlies if there's we're gonna define a playing property in our view model and say if it's playing, then we want to show pause, and then otherwise we want to show play. So right now it'll just always show play because there's no playing property defined. So let's do that. So we're going to add this, and in our case, playing is going to be a Boolean. It's always either going to be true or false. The next thing that we want is we want when the video starts playing, then we're going to need it to set this playing property in our view model. So let's create those play and pause methods. So we'll do play, and when play is called, then this.playing should be true. And then when, let's say, pause is called, then this.playing is going to be false. So, and in any of our methods, this is always going to refer to the instance of the ViewModel for that component. So like when CanJS finds this video player element, it creates a new instance of this ViewModel, and then in any of our methods, this is referring to that particular instance. So we could have multiple video players in the page, and they'd all be maintaining their own local state of whether they were playing or not. Okay, so our last bit, who has an idea of what we need to do for our last bit?
I put another default statement inside the button tag, and click, and then equals pause, then another default statement if I fire play or else pause. Okay. Like that.
Yeah. So we will get to. I think in the next step, we're going to want to add add that click handler. And what we're going to do is we don't want to conditionally have the method change depending on if it's playing or if it's paused. What we'll be able to do is just call this the same method to like toggle the playing state. So we'll get to that in just a minute. Right now, I want to listen for the video emitting. I think it was play and pause. Yeah. So the video element emits play and pause events. So we're gonna do. Let's break this up. We're gonna do on play. We want to call our play method in the ViewModel, and then same thing on pause. We want to call our pause method. So whenever the video emits these two events, it'll call these methods in our ViewModel. Let's see if it works. So when I click on the play button in the like native controls, then our button switches to pause, and then likewise when I hit the pause button in the native controls, then our button switches back to showing play. Any questions? Yeah, so when I hit play in the native controls, then the button switches, and then vice versa. Yeah. Our next step will be making our play button work, our play and pause button work. Any other questions before we move on? No? Cool. Let's all copy paste scroll down to the JavaScript. Yeah.
Is that closing /div? Is that required?
Yeah, it will. Stash is not as lenient as HTML, where it'll try and guess where you meant to have the if or have the if end. If you don't have the closing if, then that else case would just be everything else in the view. So that's why we want to have the ending or that closing if. Okay. Cool. So let's all start on the same basis and copy paste the code. I know mine was formatted a little bit differently, so it's the same effect. This one just has it all on one line, maybe some spacing differences, but everyone good? Yeah. All right. So next thing is let's make this interactive. So when we hit our play button, we want the video to play, and then vice versa. So what do we need to know? Well, kind of conceptually, I want to take a minute to talk about states and kind of principles. So in general, CanJS prefers that you kind of write your code so stuff in the ViewModel is not directly accessing any elements and doing DOM modifications on your own. So in what we have right now, let me hide the HTML. We don't need that anymore. In what we have right now, we don't ever have to reference the button element to change its text content to be pause or play, right? We could do that. We could have written that in a different way where on play, we do this dot element, query selector for the button, and then we set its text content to pause, and then vice versa, right? But the point of CanJS is getting you away from having to do your own DOM manipulation and managing the DOM state. So you declare the properties or methods in your view model, and then your view automatically updates when those properties change. Does that kind of make sense conceptually? Yes, no, maybe. So that's great most of the time. So for stuff like this, when we can have our if statements to conditionally render text, or in the case of the video elements, we didn't have to write our own document.add event listener, find the video elements, listen for the play method, and then call our own events, right? Again, that's another case where the syntax just kind of abstracts that away from you, so you don't have to worry about it. But there are cases in which you might sometimes need to access the actual DOM, the actual elements. So in the case of video elements, it doesn't have a property that is playing that we can bind to and say, okay, when our ViewModel property is playing is true, then we want the video to play, right? The video element that doesn't give us that. That's not how its API works. So we're going to need to be able to get a reference to this video element, and we're going to need to call play and pause methods on it to be able to start and stop the video. So CanJS gives you a little bit of an escape hatch when you need access to the DOM, and instead of having stuff in your ViewModel methods, we give you one lifecycle hook called ConnectedCallback, and that gives you the elements for the components. And in there, it's kind of a nice one single place where you can do any listening of DOM events and do any like DOM modifications that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. So let's go through what we just talked about. So I mentioned how we're going to need to, on the video element, we're going to need to call play and pause to be able to start and stop the video. So what we can do is on our button element, we can have a click handler that calls a method like toggle play. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where in our like toggle play method, we can change playing to true or false, right? This is the bang just means I want the opposite of this for a Boolean. So we can still have our button click do, call our ViewModel method and then change the property. But then in that connected callback, we can listen for when our ViewModel's playing property changes and then just do the DOM modifications there. So in this example, what we're doing is we have access to the ViewModel. We can listen for when its playing property changes, and then our function is going to be called whenever it changes. So this is playing is either going to be true or false, depending on whatever the current state is. And it's here where if we have a reference to the video elements, we can call play or we can call pause. And this is all kept in like one location where whatever is responsible for changing the ViewModel's playing property, we can always listen for that and then change the video element to either start playing or to pause. Does that make a little bit of sense? Ish? Yeah, so inside, let's actually see if it talks about it. Yeah, so in our ViewModel, we can define, that's called incorrectly, a connected callback method that gets called with the element when it's inserted into the DOM. So like in our case right now, this element is the video player element, and it has the video inside it with the div and the button and all that jazz. So it's here that we can set up whatever listeners, like manual listeners that we need to. So in this case, when connected callback is called, this inside of it is the ViewModel, and then we can listen for the ViewModel's playing property to change, and then call the methods on our video element that we need to. The last piece of that is, yeah, so this is more thoroughly explaining. So in connected callback, this inside of it is our ViewModel. It has a special like listen to method where we can pass it whatever ViewModel property that we want, and then our function gets called whenever it changes. And then the last little bit is to get a reference to our video element, we can query this element that's passed into us. And then once this is assigned to a variable, then we can call the play and pause methods to change it. Any questions? No questions? Okay, cool.
Query selected part was moving out a little bit.
Yeah. So look up the docs. So queries.
The regular query selector.
Regular query selector, yeah. So the element that's passed in here is a regular DOM element. It's not like a jQuery wrapped element or anything weird. It's just a DOM element, which means all of the DOM methods and whatever are available to you. So in our case, we say in our component, we don't want to do like a document.query selector. That would get any video in the entire DOM. So we're going to do an element.query selector. So we just get, let me go back to the code. So we just get the video that's inside of our component.
Let me ask you a second. This is
Yeah.
built on top of React, right?
No,
Or this is
completely separate. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Okay. Yeah. So there's no React, no like other framework involved.
This
It's a
is
framework
totally
of its own.
separate framework.
it's a framework of its own, right?
Framework of its own. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
It looks like it's essentially an object-oriented framework, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of like, it's very flexible. We're not covering the entire API, but it's flexible in how it can be used. But some of the stuff that we're doing, like all of the stuff with the observables, where like just go back to the JS bin. Like when a new video player component is created, it creates an instance of this view model, and then like inside here, it's very object oriented. You have that instance, and then you can do whatever you want with it. And then any changes that we make in the view model will cause not our entire view to be re-rendered like you would see in React, where with set state and you have a whole component being re-rendered. In CanJS, it'll only be the part of the template that has actually changed or been affected. So let me actually show you what that looks like. So here, when we click on, the like native PlayPause controls, that's causing this .playing to be changed in our view model, which isn't causing the entire video element video player element to be re-rendered. This .playing is only responsible for this little section. This .playing is only responsible for our button, which is why you can see in the DevTools it's only highlighting like the button's text content is being changed.
Let me hijack the conversation for a moment.
Yeah.
So with React, what I was confused about is, okay, so it creates a state DOM, right? Then it calculates what is better, and then it replaces the whole thing DOM. So I never really understood the benefit. Supposedly it's faster, but why is it faster?
So I don't have, in essence, like this is faster than like doing a whole recalculation of what the DOM tree should look like, and then doing the diffing, and then applying the DOM changes. Basically, CanJS has a reference to like when any observable property changes, what that should change in the view. So it doesn't have to do a like complete diff of a virtual DOM in order to figure out versus the real DOM what changes should be made. So I would say this model is usually better. I'm sure there are cases where you can find cases where one way is going to have different performance characteristics. But that's one of the reasons why we, like in CanJS, it doesn't do a diff of everything. It's just able to modify what should actually be changed, if that makes sense.
It's very intuitive, right? Just my confusion is why React and virtual DOM are supposed to be faster. And you kind of answered it, but where's the trade-off? Because it seems to be more work.
Yeah.
The other way, but where's the trade-off? Where is it winning?
So
this approach,
yeah, the approach. I wish I were more well-versed in React to be able to say like when their like virtual DOM diffing is more performant. I'm struggling to come up with in what cases that would be faster than when you're just modifying the like minimum amount of the DOM. There must be cases. I'm just not aware of what they are. I think the biggest thing with React is the mental model for, okay, my entire view, my entire render method is going to be recalled, or is going to be called again to get an entirely new tree. That is a little bit more conceptually simple to people if they know that, okay, when I've called set state and my component needs to be re-rendered, my render method gets called, and every time the entire thing will get called. Versus in this kind of more like what you were saying, object-oriented, you're letting CanJS be responsible for figuring out what parts of the view need to be updated. So there is no, like render method to be called. You're letting the framework decide when things need to change and what have you. I feel like that wasn't a super good explanation, but yeah.
I think it's correct. It's primarily created for smart devices. And when it was there, then you modified down the whole page for the entire. And here they wanted to only like incremental to see what has changed, only make that change, but keep the rest the same. So that way, you don't have the bandwidth and resources to reload every time. So
yeah, and that's why, like single page. Yeah, and that's why like single page web applications have become so popular. Yeah.
And that's why everything is going in the direction. Microservices, everything modular, everything only does one thing. That's obviously the idea. The closest you get to that.
That was a good tangent. You guys want to take a few minutes to try and come up with a solution for this section? So I'll kind of reiterate. So what our goal is when the player pause button gets clicked, we want to call some method in our view model to toggle the playing property to either be true or false. And then we want to listen for when that changes so that we can call play or pause on our video element. The reason why we have to do that is because there's no DOM API that has like a is playing, or it'd be all lowercase, like is playing. We can't bind to that in there's no like is playing property of a video element that we can bind to and then have that change, which is why we have to get a reference to the video element and then call player pause on our own. I'll go back to this part of the code. There we go. Anyone feel like they came up with a solution? They got part way, maybe? Yeah, that's okay. We'll talk through it together. So our goal was to, when we click on this play pause button, we want to toggle the state of the this.playing property in our view model. And then we want to listen for that. And then depending on what its value is, we want to call player pause on the video element. Let's start with adding the click handler to the button. So we can do on and then whatever DOM, let me pump this up, whatever DOM event we want to. So we'll listen for clicks, and I'm going to say toggle. So whenever the button is clicked, our toggle method will be called, which means we actually need a toggle method. So let's define one. So for toggle, we want to say, so for toggle, we want to say the opposite of whatever playing is now is the new value for playing. And then the last little bit is we want to listen for when playing changes and call player pause on the video element as playing changes. So we can do this.listen to, and this being the view model in our instance. And we want to listen for the playing property to change. When it does, our function is going to be called. It'll give us the event. It'll give us an event object for like what happened, what changed. We're not going to use it. What we really care about is whether or not it's playing or not. Yeah, there we go. So if it is playing, if the playing property is now playing, right, we click play, that means we want to call play on our video element. Let's get a reference to our video element. We're passed in the element for the component in ConnectedCallback. So what we can do is we can say our video element is going to be element.querySelector, and we want to find the video element in our view. So this gets us a reference to our video element. So if it is is playing is true now, then we want to call play, and then otherwise we're going to call, I think it's pause. Yeah. Okay. Did I spell that right? Video element.pause. All right, cross our fingers, it works. Let's see. So I hit play. Hey, it plays the video. I hit pause, and then it stops the video. So we've got our click. Our on click is calling toggle, which is switching playing, and then after that happens, this callback gets called, and then we get to actually call video element.playerPause. Any questions or comments before we move on? Yeah, up here. Oh, this toggle method.
What do you call it?
So this is that's the listener for it. This is similar to what we did for the video. We can listen to any DOM event that that an element emits. It's the same like on colon syntax and then calling something in our view model. Cool. Any other questions? Cool. Okay. I'm gonna, like times before, I'm gonna copy and replace everything in here. I'm sure there were things that were different. Yeah, so like in the official guide, it's called toggle play instead of just toggle that we had. And this is basically the same. Doing the element.query selector is the same as what we were doing in a variable. Doesn't matter. Okay, so our next step is we're going to build this part of the controls. So we want to show whatever the current time is, and then the duration of the entire video. We're going to do that by adding just a couple spans underneath the button that we have. So the first one will be for the current time, and then our second one will be for the duration. So what do you need to know? So in Stash, we've already done like double curly braces and then just like a like variable name to reference, okay, I want that property rendered in my template. Well, we can also call methods, which I think is something that we talked about a little bit earlier. So we can call methods in our ViewModel, and then whatever they return is what will render in the template. So as an example, if we wanted to take a value and always render it as uppercase, we could call upper with whatever variable, and then that would be passed into our method in the ViewModel, and then we could manipulate it however we want and return something that will actually be rendered in the template. So we can take whatever value from the template, pass it into our ViewModel method, and then whatever is returned is what's going to be rendered in these curly braces. So in our case, this little cheat code for that you can refer to for like writing the code. Basically, what we want to do is we want to have a method that takes in a value and then spits out like the minutes and seconds in our template. So this code is essentially taking in whatever amount of time, dividing it by 60 to get the minutes, and then taking the remainder of that to get the seconds, and then returning a string that is the minutes colon and then the seconds. So in our case, we're gonna want to render the current time and the full duration, which means we need access to those properties. We need to know what the duration is of the video, and we need to know what the current time is. And those are both things that we can get from the video element. So basically, there's a bunch of kind of state changes that happen as a video element is inserted into the page. So there's a step for when the browser first makes the request to get the video. It might get some of the headers and some of the initial information. As it starts to download the video, most codecs will put some kind of information in the top of the video file to say, okay, this is the like total duration, size, whatever other information. So when the browser starts to download it, it can get that metadata. So video elements emit a loaded metadata event when they've got the information, like that basic information, like the duration of the video. There's also a time update event that's emitted as the video progresses. So that's another thing that we can listen to on the video element. We can listen for load metadata and time update. We can listen for those events. And then we could call methods in our ViewModel. And if we have a reference to the video element, then we can read those properties. We can read the video element's duration and its current time. And that's a way that we could basically copy info from the video element and put it in our ViewModel so we can render it. Does that little part make sense about like listening to the events on the video element and then taking values from it? Cool. And then the very last bit is remember before we were talking about how, for the most part, we don't want direct DOM access in our view model. We don't want to be querying the DOM to get things. So Stash provides some special properties or special values in scope that let you access whatever is currently the scope at that point. So in our case, when we listen for DOM events on the video, we can get a reference to the video element itself through this special scope.element, essentially like variable that's made available to us. So the way that you might put these together is might listen for the events on the video. So we talked about load metadata and time update. So we can listen for those. If we pass the video element like this to our view model, then we can read the duration and the current time from that element. And then we can somehow render those in the template and give it a special formatting. I'm gonna leave you guys a few minutes to start hacking on that on your own. So our goal is we want to listen for the load metadata and time update from the video element so that we can get the duration and current time properties from the video element and put them in our view model. And then we want to render a couple of spans in our template that show the current time formatted nicely and the total duration formatted nicely. I'll let you guys hack on that on your own. And if you have any questions, happy to chat. Who has some ideas for what we need to do for this step? Anyone want to give me a hint of where I should get started for this? Or which part we want to tackle first? Yeah. Yeah, let's do that. So I'll add that here. So what were the two events? Time update. And what should we call this method that we're gonna call in the view model? What's up? Yeah, we can call it whatever we want to. All right. What's the other event that we're going to listen for? Load metadata. Okay, so when the video element fires time update or load metadata, then we want our, let's call this update times. We're going to call our update times method. And in those, we're going to want a reference to the video element so that we can read its duration and its current time. So I'm going to pass scope.element into both of these. Well, it's the same method, but in both places. So that means we can define our update times method. We'll have our video element passed into us. Spelling is not element. There we go. Okay, so we've got our video element. What do we want to assign in our view model? Say duration is that right? Video element has a duration property. Okay, we'll just use the same names as what's in the video element. So this dot duration is the video element duration, and this dot current time is the video element current time. We added these properties in our view model, so let's add these to as like defined. So duration is going to be a number, and current time is going to be the same. Basically, in defining these properties, we're saying what those values should look like and what we're expecting. So if we set something that that wasn't a number, then it would be converted to a number. Same thing with our string and Boolean types. So we're just saying whatever we get, we want it to be our a number. Okay, what should be next? We've got our listeners, and we're updating the duration and current time. What else do we need to do? Yeah, let's cheat, and we've got this method given to us for formatting the time. Let's use it. So I'm gonna copy and paste this in, and just fix this real quick. So now we've got a format time method in our view model. So whatever time is given to it, it'll format. It'll return a string that is how we want it to be, which means we can add those spans into our view. So let's do span. We're going to do what comes first? Current time. We'll do the current time formatted. And then we'll do the total duration formatted. Okay. Format time. Cool. What else? Is there anything else that we need to do? I don't think so. So when, let me run that again. Did I spell this wrong on load metadata? Load metadata equals 8 times our video element. I'm not sure why it's not showing it should be showing the current time and duration right off the top. Instead of like trying to debug this, I'm going to use the cheat code and copy and paste things. Maybe it's just a browser. No. Okay. So yeah. Yeah, so if there's no current time, then it'll default to 0. Yeah, I'm not sure what I typed differently. Yeah, I'm not sure what I typed differently before, but we've got it working. So you can copy paste the JavaScript, and we've got it working. So the current time is showing, and then the total duration, and then when we click on play, when the video is playing, that entire time, this on time update is being fired. So just kind of continuously as it progresses, our update times function is being called, which causes the current time property to change, which means this span gets re-rendered and reformatted. Cool. Any questions before we move on?
Yeah, you probably mentioned so basically the scope element, scope element did assign a value when update, when ConnectedCallback is fired.
So this scope, so usually all of the things in the view are defined by the ViewModel. Like this source and current time and duration, they're all defined in the ViewModel. There is one special property that is made available in any template, and that's this scope property. And scope is whatever the context is wherever it's put. So scope.element here is the video element that it's on. If scope.element were over here in the button, like if we did scope.element here, then our toggle play method would be called with the button element. So this is just a special way in Stash that's specific to CanStash that lets you take something that's in scope in the template and then provide it to your ViewModel. Cool. Any other questions? That was a good one. All right. That was a little bit of an intense step. This one is a little bit more straightforward. So the last part of the controls that we want to build is a slider for being able to show the current progress. And in HTML, who's used an input element with type range before? 1, 2, cool. All right. So it's a pretty cool element if you think HTML elements are cool. I don't know. I'm that guy. You can provide a bunch of different attributes to control how it displays. So what did I do? Okay. So like you can have input type range, and you can say, okay, I want my minimum value to be 0, I want my max to be 1, and then I want its current value to be 0.5. And I'm not sure why it's not rendering. I don't know what my issue is. I am having issues. Yeah. My JS bin is on the struggle bus right now. Yeah, I'm not sure why it's not liking. That's fine. I did. Oh, up here. Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you. So, okay, that I think that was my issue earlier with it not displaying correctly. So yeah, this this input type range can you can give it a min max and then let it render with a value. Let me. Oh, maybe it doesn't accept incremental values. Yeah, so it's let's say 100, and 50 would be in the middle, or 5 would be a little bit earlier on. So what we want to do is we want to have the input type range, and the value that we want to give it is the percent through the video that we are. So the way that we can bind to the input element is by using :bind. So we've used :raw earlier, and :bind lets us do a two-way binding between the input and property in our view model. So if we have like a percent complete property in our view model, or if we have a percent complete method in our view model that returns like the current time divided by the duration, then the input will update as the current time changes. Our duration is always the same, but as current time changes, then it would continue to update. I think everything that I just talked about is all that we needed to know. Input type range, if we have a like a percent complete getter in our view model, then we can return current time divided by duration. And then we can do, oh, in this example, or right here, we're saying value from instead. So whatever this value is, it'll set the value of the input. Or you can read this as the input's value comes from this property in our view model. Cool. Give you guys a few minutes to hack.
Value column from that CanJS sequence.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think, although this works, but it's really they should not have called it percent complete. They should have called it fraction complete. Because what you're calculating is not in percentage form.
So the current time and the duration are in seconds? Are they what?
Whatever they are, let's say the total duration is 4 seconds and the current time is 2 seconds. When you divide 2 by 4, you don't get percent complete, you get fraction.
Okay, yeah.
You know, these minor things, obviously in this case works, but that's what in larger things breaks down, like in finance apps or things that there are more computations involved. Minor things like that, I've seen that cause problems.
Yeah, we could definitely call this property.
Like you said, you have total control to name it whatever you want to call it.
Yep. Yeah.
That's an example that they give.
Yeah, exactly.
Just, you know, like a footnote. In this case, it will work, but because you're not doing anything beyond
you can think of it as the percentage from the total time of the duration.
You have to multiply by to be mathematically correct.
Yeah.
But I'm surprised that when you gave it fraction, it was not rendering properly.
Yeah, I had forgotten. So in we can look at the docs for input type range. It accepts. Where are the docs for that?
Oh, I think I saw. I saw another attribute. There was a step.
Yeah.
I think we should say. I think something like step A.
Yeah, that's
default. It looks like it's step.
That's what I should have pointed out here, and it says, like, in the guide, it says by default I think step is 1, which is why whatever fractional value I gave it, it was always gonna be either 0 or 1. So that's what I was missing before when I was talking about input type range. Cool. Let's go through the solution. So we already started to do this in our template. So we're going to do min 0, max 1, and then we're going to do step any. We could also do, a really small number. Let's do any. And then we want to get the value from, we want to get the value from a property. So we could do it as a method that returns it. Let's do it as a property, and let's call it fraction complete. Okay. Okay, and then now we need the property. So who has used like ES5 getters before? The getter syntax is get, and then and then the property name with the parentheses, and then the curly braces. So this isn't like a CanJS thing. It's just a JavaScript thing. So this is a getter. It's like a property, and we can do whatever computations we want in this getter and return a value. So in our case, we're going to do this dot current time divided by duration. This dot duration. Okay. Fraction complete. Cool. So when we hit play, as the remember we have a listener, so current time is being updated, and as that happens, our getter is being called. So as this dot current time changes, our getter gets called, and then it returns a new value, which is bound to the input, and that's how it gets updated. Any questions? No? Cool. We're basically at the end of our time. There are a couple more things. I wanted us to be able to drag this and have it update the video and what it was playing. I think that was just the last step. So if you're interested, definitely take the JS bin you have and try it at home, and you can finish up the guide. Any questions or comments before we go? Yeah. So similar to how we have this getter, we can two-way bind this input. So it doesn't just get the value from the ViewModel, it also can set the value on the ViewModel. So the way we do that, we can use our same fraction complete, and then we could use the setter syntax for setting it. And then what we want to do is we would calculate the current time based on whatever value was set. So we would get the new value, and then we could do the math to set this dot current time to, would it be this? The new value duration?
Yeah, that should do it.
Yeah. So we would need to also update the video element. So like this is setting the current time in our view model, but there's nothing that's setting it on the video. So basically what we could do is the same thing here, listen to current time, and then we could set the current time to whatever gets passed to us. If this works, I'll be happily surprised. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah. And that'd be it. Cool.
Is there a way to scrub?
How do you mean?
Like, for example, that's scrolling. Like,
Oh yeah. Okay. So the problem with that is, or the reason why it doesn't do that right now is because the input's value only changes when you release, right? So we could look to see if there's maybe input has, maybe it has like an on change that we could listen for, and then we could do our update slider with scope.element, and then if that event is a thing, then we could update it then. Maybe. I don't know what other. Yeah, but yeah, that's a really great question. Cool. Anything else?
Can you show what you just typed?
Up here.
Yeah. So what I'm confused about, with this one you use scope.element. The other bind, right?
Yeah. So this binding is just taking the value and then like getting it and setting it, and versus this is listening for an event. So when when the change event fires, then we want our method called. So that's why here we're just getting and setting the input's value, and then getting and setting our fraction complete property in our view model, versus listening for the change event to fire. And then there's the change event fires, but it doesn't have like an inherent value or anything. We need to call our view model and then do whatever logic we want to. Cool. Anything else? Awesome. Thanks everyone for coming. Everyone who is watching on the live stream, thanks for watching. And we'll be back probably sometime next month with another DoneJS LA. Bye.